Section 13, A Daughter of the Sioux. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Mike Vendetti, MikeVendetti.com. A Daughter of the Sioux by General Charles King. Chapter 13, Wounded, Body and Soul. To say the Sioux were furious at the failure of their second attempt would be putting it far too mildly. The fierce charge from the northward side, made under cover of the blinding smoke sent drifting by the gale across the level flats, had been pushed so close to the grove that 2 red braves and half a dozen ponies had met their death within 60 paces of the rifle pits. There lay the bodies now, and the Indians dare not attempt to reach them. The dread, wind-driven flame of the prairie fire, planned by the Sioux to burn out the defense, to serve as their ally, had been turned to their grave detriment. Ray and his devoted men had stopped the sweep of so much of the conflagration as threatened their little stronghold, but raging unhampered elsewhere, the seething wall rolled on towards the east, spreading gradually towards its flanks, and so not only consuming vast acres of bunch grass, but checking the attack that should have been made from the entire southern half of the Indian circle. Later, leaping the sandy stream bed a little to the west of the cottonwoods, it spread in wild career over a huge tract along the left bank, and now, reuniting with the southern wing some distance down the valley, was roaring away to the bluffs of the Minneposa, leaving death and desolation in its track. Miles to the east, the war parties from the reservation, riding to join Lame Wolf, sighted the black curtain of smoke, swift sailing over the prairie, and changed their course accordingly. Not so many miles away to the south, Webb's skirmishers, driving before them 3 or 4 Sioux scouts from the northward slope of the Moccasin Ridge, set spurs to their horses and took the gallop, the main body following on with their eyelids blistered by heat and smoke. Ray's silent, determined little band could see nothing of the coming force, yet new relief was nigh, for close at hand, both east and west, large bodies of enemy could be seen swift riding away to the north. They had hoped, as Fox had planned and promised, to burn out and overwhelm the little troop at the grove before the column from Frayne could possibly reach the spot. They had even anticipated the probable effort of the command to check the flames, and had told off some 50 braves to open concentric fire on any party that could rush into the open with that object in view. They had thought to send in such a storm of lead, even from long range, that it should daunt and drive back those who dared to attempt. They had stormed indeed, but could neither daunt nor drive back. Ray's men had braved death itself in the desperate essay, and even in dying had won the day. But their losses had been cruel. 3 killed outright, 3 dying, and 8 more or less severely wounded had reduced their fighting strength to nearly 30. The guards of the sorrels herded in the stream bed had all they could do to control the poor frightened creatures. Many of them hit, several of them felled by the plunging fire from the far hillsides. Even though driven back, the Sioux never meant to give up the battle. On every side, leaving their ponies at safe distance by dozens, the warriors crawled forward, snake-like, to the edge of the burned and blackened surface, and from there poured in a rapid and most harassing fire, compelling the defense to lie flat or burrow further and wounding many horses. The half hour that followed the repulse of their grand assault had been sorely trying to the troop, for the wounded needed aid. More men were hit, and there was no chance whatever to hit back. Moving from point to point, Ray carried cheer and courage on every side, yet was so constantly exposed as to cause his men fresh anxiety. Even as he was bending over Field, a bullet had nipped the right shoulder strap, and later another had torn through the crown of his campaign hat. In all the years of their frontier fighting they had never known a hotter fire, but Ray's voice rang out through the drifting vapor with the same old cheer and confidence. "They can't charge again till the ground cools off," he cried. "By that time they'll have their hands full. See how they're scuttling away at the southward, even now. Just keep covered and you're all right." And barring a growl or two from favored old hands who sought to make the captain take his own medicine and himself keep covered, the answer was full of cheer. And so they waded through the hot smoke and sunshine of the autumn afternoon, and even while comforting the wounded with assurance of coming relief, kept vigilant watch on every hostile move. And at last, toward 3 o'clock, the sharp fire about them slackened away. The smoldering roots of the bunch grass had burned themselves out. The smoke drifted away from the prairie, and as the landscape cleared to the south and west, a cheer of delight went up from the cottonwoods. For the slopes 3 miles away were dotted here and there and everywhere with circling, scurrying war ponies, they and their wild riders steadily following back before a long rank of disciplined horsemen, the extended skirmish line of Webb's squadron, backed by supports at regular intervals, and all heading straight on for the broad lowlands of the Elk. "Send 6 of your men over to the south front, Sergeant," were Ray's orders to Winsor, as he hurried over to join Clayton again. "They may try one final charge from that side, and give us a chance to empty a few more saddles." Creeping and crouching through the timber, the chosen men obeyed, and were assigned to stations under Clayton's eye. The precaution was wise indeed, for just as the captain foresaw, a rally in force began far out over the southward slopes, the Indians gathering in great numbers about some chieftain midway between the coming force and the still beleaguered defenders of the grove. Then, brandishing lance and shield and rifle, as before, they began spreading out across the prairie, heading now for the cottonwoods, while others still faced and fired on the far blue skirmish line. The fierce wind, sweeping across the direction of the attack, deadened all sound of hoof or war chant, but there was no mistaking the signs, no doubt of the intent, when in a little moment more the earth began to tremble beneath the dancing pony feet, telling, almost within the swiftness of sight, that the grand advance had again begun. But other eyes were watching too, other soldiers, keen campaigners, as those at the Elk, were there afield. And almost at the moment the wild, barbaric horde burst yelling into their eager gallop, and before the dust cloud hid the distant slopes beyond, the exuberant shout went up from the captain's lips as he threw down his glass and grabbed his carbine. "It's all right, men. The major's coming. At their heels. Now let 'em have it." In former days there had been scenes of wild rejoicing, sometimes of deep emotion, when relief came to some Indian besieged detachment of the old regiment. Once, far to the south in the wild, romantic park country of Colorado, a strong detachment had been corralled for days by an overwhelming force of Utes, their commander a dozen of their best men, all the horses killed, and many troopers sorely wounded. They had been rescued at last by their skilled and gallant colonel, after a long and most scientific march by both night and day. Another time, still further in their past, but still within a dozen years, away down the broad valley of the very stream of which this Little Elk was a tributary, the Cheyennes had hemmed in and sorely hammered 2 depleted troops that owed their ultimate rescue to the daring of the very officer who so coolly, confidently headed the defense this day, to a night ride through the Indian lines that nearly cost him his brave young life. But that brought Captain Truscott with a fresh and powerful troop, sweeping in to their succor with the dawn. Then there had been men who strained other men to their hearts, and who shed tears like women for gallant comrades had bitten the dust in the desperate fighting of the day before, and hope itself had almost gone with the ammunition of the beleaguered command. Now, with heavier losses than had befallen Wayne in '76, Ray's command beheld with almost tranquil hearts the coming of the fierce array in final charge. Behind them, not 2 miles, to be sure, rode in swift, well-ordered pursuit the long line of comrade troopers. But there had been intervening years of campaign experiences that dulled to a degree the earlier enthusiasms of the soldier.